Welcome to The Explainer. So, imagine for a second being the person who practically builds an entire nation from the ground up. We're talking grueling, 18-hour workdays, literally building the army, drafting the treaties, and pushing harder than anyone else for independence. Now imagine that when the history books are finally written, everyone else gets the glory. That is the incredible, undeniable, and honestly somewhat tragic historical irony of John Adams. He was the literal architect of the United States who, somehow, got pushed right out of the spotlight.
Section 1. The Overshadowed Founding Father. To really get a grip on who this man was, we absolutely have to start with the core paradox of his life.
I mean, just think about it. The guy essentially created the Continental Army by nominating George Washington to lead it. He passionately pushed the Declaration of Independence through Congress, and he negotiated the Treaty of Paris. But who got the glory? Well, the acclaim for the Army went entirely to Washington. The praise for the Declaration went to its primary drafter, Thomas Jefferson. And the credit for the Treaty of Paris, that's usually handed to the highly charismatic Benjamin Franklin. Adams did all the gritty behind-the-scenes heavy lifting, while his peers walked away with the flashy credit.
Which brings us to Section 2, from moderate to revolutionary. You know, Adams didn't start out wanting to overthrow an empire. Born in 1735 in Massachusetts, he actually began his career as a highly educated, Harvard-trained lawyer. Back then, he was very much a moderate. He just wanted the British crown to respect the rights of the colonists.
But his defining character trait was this. John Adams almost always made the honorable but highly unpopular choice. There's no better example of this than in 1770. After the Boston Massacre, where British soldiers fired into an angry mob, those soldiers were universally despised. Yet Adams stepped up to defend them in court. He firmly believed everyone deserved a fair trial, and guess what? He actually got the commanding officer and his soldiers acquitted. Obviously, it wasn't a popular move with the local patriots, but it proved his absolute dedication to principle over popularity.
Following that 1770 defense, the British government just kept aggressively overreaching. They passed the Tea Act in 1773, which sparked the Boston Tea Party, an event Adams actually applauded as a grand event, by the way. Then came the naval blockades, and finally, in 1775, the armed clashes at Lexington and Concord. It was this rapid cascade of British tyranny that quickly radicalized this moderate lawyer into believing that complete independence was the only realistic path forward.
Section 3. Architect of Independence. Now we head to the Second Continental Congress in Philadelphia, where his unmatched work ethic truly laid the physical and ideological groundwork for the brand new United States.
The man's workload was just unmatched. We're talking sitting on 90 different committees and chairing over 24 of them. He headed the Board of War and Ordnance, which meant he was working 18-hour days just handling the logistics of gunpowder and weapons for the Continental Army. He drafted the Model Treaty to secure foreign alliances. And when Thomas Jefferson drafted the Declaration of Independence, it was Adams who passionately defended it on the floor, arguing relentlessly until it was finally ratified.
But what was his reward for all this hard work? Honestly, mostly just intense frustration, especially when he was sent to Europe as a diplomat. Adams successfully helped negotiate the Treaty of Paris to end the war, and he secured vital loans from the Dutch. But in France, his rigid, blunt, and highly principled diplomatic style totally irritated the French court. They largely ignored him in favor of Benjamin Franklin, whose relaxed and deferential approach was way more popular in Paris. Once again, Adams was doing the heavy diplomatic lifting, but felt completely sidelined.
Section 4. The Insignificant Vice Presidency. Fast forward a bit, the war is over, the new U.S. Constitution is drafted, establishing the executive branch. Adams eagerly returns home, ready to serve his newly built nation. Unfortunately, his entry into the executive branch would prove to be a massive disappointment. He became the very first vice president, serving under George Washington, and he was incredibly bitter about it. He famously called it the most insignificant office that ever the invention of man contrived. It's kind of funny, right? But it's also deeply ironic. Here is a man who craved action, stuck in a role with almost no constitutional power. He was marginalized by Washington, who rarely consulted him, and he was openly mocked by the Senate for his conservative ideas, like suggesting the president should be called His Highness.
During his vice presidency, the Founding Fathers basically shattered into two factions, known as the First Party System. On one side, you had the Federalists, led by Adams and Alexander Hamilton. They wanted strong federal power and closer ties with Britain. Plus, Adams personally viewed slavery as an abhorrence, pushing for gradual abolition. On the flip side, you had the Democratic Republicans, led by his old friend Thomas Jefferson. They wanted state power, an alliance with France, and were heavily pro-slavery. This complex ideological rift completely tore the Founding Fathers apart, and it shattered the close friendship between Adams and Jefferson.
Section 5. A contentious presidency. When George Washington finally stepped down, this bitter rivalry just exploded.
Adams actually won an incredibly narrow, super acrimonious election against Jefferson in 1796 to become the second president of the United States, and he was stepping into a profoundly fraught political landscape. The biggest crisis of his presidency was the very real threat of war with France, following a diplomatic disaster known as the XYZ affair, where French ministers actually demanded bribes. The American public was absolutely outraged. Adams' own Federalist Party was screaming for an all-out war. But true to form, Adams made the unpopular but principled choice. He refused to declare full-scale war, opting instead to build up the Navy and engage in a limited quasi-war at sea. By defying his own pro-war party, he established a crucial precedent for American neutrality that would literally last for generations.
Now, the paranoia of this period did lead to what is widely considered the darkest mark on his legacy, the Alien and Sedition Acts. Passed in 1798, these laws targeted French agents and cracked down on pro-democratic Republican newspapers. It's really important to note here that these acts originated in Congress, not with Adams, and he only reluctantly signed them into law. Still, they were widely used to censor the press and attack political opponents. This led to long-standing and severe accusations of executive overreach that permanently damaged his reputation.
In the middle of all this fierce political chaos, Adams did hit a pretty cool milestone. He became the first president to move into the new capital in Washington, D.C., taking up residence in what we now call the White House. And showing his true character, one of his notable actions there was issuing an executive pardon to the leaders of Freeze's tax rebellion, choosing leniency and peace over execution. Section 6. Rivalry, Reconciliation, and Legacy. Unfortunately for Adams, his independent streak and the total disunity within his own party cost him dearly in the bitter election of 1800, where he was defeated by his rival, Thomas Jefferson. Adams quietly left Washington, forcing him into a very long and complicated retirement.
0. Think about this for a second. Out of the first 5 presidents of the United States, the men who literally founded the country, John Adams was the only one limited to a single term. Washington, Jefferson, Madison, Monroe, they all served 2. And furthermore, of those first 5 presidents, John Adams was the only one who owned 0 slaves. It's a powerful statistic that speaks volumes about his unique standing among the founders.
His final decades back at his farm in Quincy were, well, they were incredibly bittersweet. He suffered massive financial ruin when a London trading company, Bird, Savage & Bird, completely collapsed. He also bore the profound grief of watching 2 of his sons descend into alcoholism and early death. Yet, despite his political past, he largely supported the foreign policies of Jefferson and Madison during his retirement. And he experienced immense pride in living to see his eldest, highly successful son, John Quincy Adams, be sworn in as the 6th President of the United States.
But perhaps the most touching part of his retirement, his relationship with Thomas Jefferson. After 11 long years of total bitter silence, a mutual friend, Benjamin Rush, helped the 2 men reconcile in 1812. What followed was a profound 14-year philosophical correspondence. 2 old revolutionaries in the twilight of their lives, putting aside their politics to write letters reflecting on life, philosophy, and the nation they built together.
50. Exactly 50 years to the day after the signing of the Declaration of Independence on July 4, 1826, John Adams passed away at the age of 90. And by a truly remarkable coincidence of history, just hours earlier on that exact same day, Thomas Jefferson had also passed away in Virginia. You literally couldn't write a more poetic ending.
Which leaves us with a pretty provocative question to reflect on. Was John Adams the greatest of the Founding Fathers? Sure, he didn't have the battlefield glory of Washington or the poetic pen of Jefferson, but he was the tireless engine in the background, the man making the unpopular choices, doing the grueling logistical work, and sacrificing his own popularity to ensure the United States actually survived its turbulent birth. So does the man who did the most behind the scenes truly deserve the highest honor? Think about that for a bit, and thank you for joining me for this explainer.